It's 9 p.m. Do you know where your key fob is?
Hey there, Nate Benson here. This week on the agenda, a deep dive into the Democratic primary race for state controller. It's a three-way dance between incumbent Tom DiNapoli and challengers Raj Goyle and Drew Warshaw. DiNapoli was first elected when the first Michael Bay Transformers movie hit the big screen. That's 2007 for all you film buffs. And the two challengers say it's time for change in that office, and a new wave of Democrats should occupy that controller's office. There's a lot of issues facing New York State this year, many related to affordability. I sat down with all three candidates for an in-depth conversation about the race, so we expanded this week's episode to a full hour. Hey. When we come back, I sit down with Raj Goyle, then Drew Warshaw, and finally the incumbent Tom DiNapoli. We'll be right back after this quick break. For those voters here in Western New York who didn't see our first interview together, give us the quick pitch of who you are and why you're running for comptroller.
I'm Raj Goyle. I'm running for comptroller because we need better Democrats. We need Democrats who will fight and not fold. I'm running to be the affordability watchdog, to lower those national grid bills, to build affordable housing, get ICE out of New York, cut Wall Street fees, and make sure that the pension fund actually returns stronger returns for our retirees.
Well, that was the quick pitch. I did ask. So, okay, Grace. So, obviously you're in a three-way race with a long incumbent and, of course, Drew Warshaw as well.
Sure.
Why should voters choose you over Drew or Tom?
Yeah, so if you think that what's happening now in your life and in politics with the affordability crisis is okay, then you should stick with the incumbent. He's been a politician longer than I've been alive, for 53 years. He's been in Albany for 40 years. So if that's okay with you, then you can certainly stick with the incumbent. But if you want somebody who will actually bring change to this office, who's a proven reformer, I worked at the ACLU as a civil rights lawyer, fighting for working families and fighting for immigrants. I am the only one. I'm the first in my family born in this country. My parents came from India to Rochester. So I understand what being in an immigrant family is like. I've lived that life. And so I've got a very clear vision, and I have been a successful CEO of a technology company. So unlike anyone else in this race, I've got true private sector experience, public sector experience as a former elected official, and that combination is what can drive change, drive those utility rates down, build housing, and reform this office so that you can actually tackle the affordability crisis, which you deserve.
Affordability has been a theme, not just in this race, but, state Senate races, assembly races as well. How does a controller really bring costs down and address those affordability issues in New York in that role?
Yeah, I mean, that's the sad part, because for the last 20 years, the incumbent could have been working on this, but he hasn't been. So the state comptroller should be the affordability watchdog, and that's what I will be. By auditing the Public Service Commission, we can open the books of National Grid, Con Ed, the other utility companies, and understand just how cooked those books are. Right now, the utility industry is completely broken. In fact, one of my opponents, Drew Warshaw, he worked in the energy industry, this is part of the problem that we've got. We need people who have actually been reformers. My technology company was actually rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in corporate budgets, and so I know where these bodies are buried, and I know what we can do. The way the comptroller can open the books of these companies, shine a light on these companies, and then make sure that we actually don't ink state contracts that approve rate hikes. I know you have a big controversy over data centers actually up in Western New York. I have been the leading opponent of data centers because I strongly support the moratorium on data centers, because we must make sure that Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they're paying for their AI data centers, not you and me and the rates, and that's what's happening now.
You mentioned auditing the PSC. Now, obviously, a controller can't audit, National Grid directly, but you can audit the PSC.
Absolutely.
What would you do, and how would that actually impact, utility rates in New York State if a controller did audit the PSC?
Yeah, so National Grid comes to the PSC and says, here's our information, and here's the spreadsheet that shows here's why we need the rate hike. The PSC then is an Albany body. It's been captured by industry. They go into some secret settlement, and they come back and say, sure, we're going to rubber stamp that hike. Well, if we saw the numbers and I exposed those numbers and we evaluated those numbers and we said, wait a second here, You are asking for a rate hike because you added these expenses to the company. That wasn't actually needed to deliver more energy to your customers. And then we can actually claw back rates. We can find out if they're paying for if they're trying to justify the rate hikes by having us subsidize those data centers. And so right now the books are closed and they're fuzzy. And when we open those and make them clearer, and of course the utility companies, as you may know, they're guaranteed a rate of return, almost 10%. I ran a business. If for every dollar I got, I was guaranteed 10% profit, that'd be a really fun business to run. And so that's why they're not held accountable. The CEOs make millions of dollars a year. They're owned by multinational companies. This is not the way that we should be operating our public utilities.
You mentioned data centers, of course, across the country. Small communities are dealing with data center issues. Seeing these data centers come in, seeing residential utility rates skyrocketing because of it.
Yes.
How does a controller protect consumers in Western New York and in New York State from this problem?
Well, two things. Number one is it's the third highest ranking position in New York and the chief financial officer. If we put the bully pulpit and the weight of the position to raise awareness and to be at these data centers, to go actually out and realize that there is to join that movement, it would be transformational. The second thing is getting back to those audits. The auditing power is so powerful, Nate, that if the comptroller actually was doing his job and used that auditing power to expose these utility companies and how they are going to use these data centers to jack up our rates, we would stop that in its tracks.
Another aspect of the controller's responsibilities is the unclaimed funds. There's about
Yes.
$20 billion in unclaimed funds in New York State. There have been critics of Controller DiNapoli regarding, getting that money back to New Yorkers. How would you address the unclaimed funds
Yeah.
issue if you were elected?
Well, I mean, he's been giving it out at a paltry rate, every year. And of course, frankly, the state budget has been using that money for other purposes. And so, I ran a machine learning company. I know this technology. We will simply, it's not too hard to give the money back directly to the people. I've been thinking about this for many years. There's other states that have done this successfully. And so right now, the office is passive. You have to go to this clunky website. They publish things in newsprint that people barely read anymore. If we proactively went out to people, we know who they are, and said, listen, this is your money, take it back. That is the way that we should actually monitor, or we should operate the unclaimed property. And I frankly, I think Tom DiNapoli goes around with those oversized checks, giving out $100 here, $50 here. That's not the way of the future. We should be using technology. And again, I am the only one in this race who's actually run a private sector business, so I know how to do this to actually get people and to get people to Western New York their money back.
In another aspect is managing the state pension. The controller's office certainly has that oversight. There are those critics who say it's been underperforming the market for many years. If you're in that role, how do you manage the pension to benefit those who are in the system?
So the pension fund should be stronger. It's as simple as that. If you are a state employee or a retiree, if we had better management for the last 20 years, you'd have more money in your pocket. Because remember that if the state pension fund has more money as a principal, we could do things like increase the benefits that are paid out, and we could perhaps lower property taxes. Right now, we're wasting billions of dollars on Wall Street fees. I understand those issues well, again, having been in the private sector. And so this is a problem that we can fix. And if people want change, and if they, right now people will say, well, listen, my check comes, of course, but wouldn't you like your check to be bigger? Wouldn't you like your money to be going into your pocket rather than the pocket of people who are already rich and feasting off the fees of our pension money? I also would point out that I'm the only one in this race who has been very clear about divesting, from Palantir. Our campaign broke that story. Tom DiNapoli has doubled his money, doubled our money that's invested in Palantir. Palantir is the company that powers ICE. And so as the son of immigrants, as somebody who's lived that life, I can tell you that I'm the only one who has a very clear vision for having the comptroller get ICE the hell out of New York. And, you have a detention center down there, in Buffalo. That's outrageous. The state comptroller has said nothing about that. I will be a comptroller that will actively work to stop any collaboration with ICE, detention centers, training facilities, obviously divesting from a company like Palantir. That is the way that we should make sure that we protect our immigrant neighbors. And I will say this as well. I do believe that our state pension fund should no longer fund war crimes abroad. I have been clear that I do think it's a genocide what's happening in Gaza. And so no one else in this race has been consistent on that issue and has been a clear moral voice for that. I know that is an issue that people have obviously a lot of emotion around, but I'm clear in my view and what I think the pension fund. Tom DiNapoli just took an all-expense paid trip to Israel, paid for by the organization that facilitates the purchasing of the Israel bonds. This is the kind of Albany pay-to-play culture that we shouldn't be accepting.
Regarding healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, obviously, potential fraud in that kind of industry has been a concern nationwide. Again, as controller, how would you help New Yorkers with healthcare costs by auditing those healthcare providers if you're able to?
Well, I will stop at nothing to find waste, fraud, and abuse. That's what I did in the private sector with the company that I founded and ran. And moreover, I think it's very disappointing that our current incumbent, the current comptroller, did nothing during this last legislative session to raise revenue, to tax the rich, to make sure that we could save 500,000 New Yorkers. We're going to be kicked off the essential plan. We're going to lose critical health insurance. We have 40% of all births in New York on Medicaid. I'm the son of mom and pop doctors who gave away a lot of their medical care. I understand what those medical clinics are like. It's outrageous. And so the state comptroller should be active on that issue, not passive, not just some bookkeeper, but somebody who's actually actively working for Western New Yorkers to get the health care they deserve.
And obviously a controller can't propose laws, but he can certainly support and advocate, right? But he's got to partner with the legislature, and that's what you're
sure.
saying.
Actually, the comptroller can propose legislation that certainly within the purview. Obviously, doesn't have a vote on the legislation, but can work very actively to propose legislation, shape legislation, and that's appropriate and in fact fitting. Right now, we have a 5-alarm fire for democracy and affordability crisis. We need to use every molecule of power we can to fight. Tom DiNapoli isn't. Raj Goyle will.
Is there a piece of, again, if you were elected, is there a piece of legislation that you would actively propose to try to get through the legislature?
Absolutely. The first thing I would do is focus like a laser on these utility rates. There was a plethora of legislation this last session, some passed, some of it good, but all nibbling around the edges. So I would have a comprehensive energy affordability office in the state comptroller. We will look at clawbacks. We will look at making sure that we don't pay for these AI data centers on the backs of ratepayers. And that would be the legislation I would focus on, of course, among other things.
Raj, the cell phone ban in schools was a big thing this year. Your thoughts on that, your role in that? Obviously, I know that's something you were quite passionate about.
Thanks, Nate. Yes, I'm very proud to have been the founder of Phone Free New York, and we were the leading advocate for the cell phone ban last year in the legislative session. It's been a resounding success all across Western New York, all across New York State. I did run a company, and I love innovation, but I'm a dad first as the father of 2 teenage daughters. I accept everybody's prayers, but I also want to point out that the cell phone ban, if you're looking for somebody who's already proven to have made a great change in your daily life. For those of you who are parents and like that cell phone ban, I was the founder of Phone Free and got that cell phone ban through the public school system, and I'm very proud of that. And so, if you're looking for someone who's made a change in your life with cell phone ban, Raj Goyle is your guy.
And certainly, the controller's office does have some oversight and auditing ability of school districts and whatnot. I mean, not that you want to be the sheriff of that, but the controller's office can have a direct compliance oversight for school districts that might still be struggling to tackle that problem, right?
Absolutely. When I'm elected as comptroller, I will focus like a laser on making sure that we protect student mental health, teen mental health, and the cell phone ban is a big part of that. There's also more that we can do, and I've been a big proponent of regulating big tech and making sure that social media algorithms do not just ruin our kids' lives. So, having been a technology CEO, having been the leading advocate for the cell phone ban, if you're looking for a state official who will actually take on big tech and continue to protect your kids and all of us from the dangers of technology, then Raj Goyle is your guy.
Drew, it's been a few months since we talked. So, for those viewers who didn't see our first interview back in the winter, who are you and why are you running for state controller?
Sure. I'm a lifelong New Yorker who helped rebuild the World Trade Center after 9/11, helped build a renewable energy company, and for the last 5 years ran the largest affordable housing nonprofit organization in the country because I think every New Yorker deserves a home they can afford. And the reason I am running is because New Yorkers can no longer afford to live in New York. And there is one statewide official who is running for a sixth term, the state controller, and I think 5 terms is enough. I think that is a position that could actually do something about the affordability crisis if energized with the level of urgency and experience that we just haven't had for the last 2 decades.
To the point you just made, this is a competitive primary. There's three candidates, you, Raj Goyle, and of course the incumbent Tom DiNapoli. Why should voters choose you over the two of them?
Yeah, look, I'm not a lifelong politician, and the other two candidates, are perennial runners for office. And if we want that, you have your choice and you have your pick. I ran the largest affordable housing nonprofit. I took on utility monopolies like National Grid and Con Edison down in New York City and helped lower electricity rates when I was in the renewable energy business. And I built stuff for a living, and I think in helping to rebuild the World Trade Center. So those are the experiences I bring to an office that could actually make a difference, particularly in the city of Buffalo that is facing a fiscal crisis that the current state controller was nowhere to be found on, even though he had a division of local finance accountability, ironically, and they were not sounding the alarm. And then a controller who has put high pressure on property taxes all across the state because he's fundamentally mismanaged our state and local public pension fund. And one out of every $3 that Buffalonians pay in property taxes go to fund that pension fund. And that is more than they need to. Unfortunately, they've had to subsidize Mr. DiNapoli's underperformance and the hundreds of Wall Street bankers that he has paid taxpayer funded fees to $1 billion last year alone. And Nate, the other thing I just have to say is that despite those local property taxes going into that pension fund, 95% of all of Mr. DiNapoli's real estate investments, they've left the state of New York. They're gone. They go to places like California and Florida. And when I'm state controller, I will start a $20 billion housing fund, and we will invest 100% of that right here in New York in historically neglected and underinvested cities like the city of Buffalo, like Rochester, like Binghamton and Syracuse, where they have great opportunities. We just need a state controller who cares enough about it and who understands how to do this for a living.
Affordability has been a main theme, not only in this controller's race, but the 61st Senate seat race here in Western New York, and of course the 149th Assembly seat in Western New York as well. Excuse me. How does a controller impact affordability and bring costs down to New Yorkers, and what would you do?
Yeah, so first, property taxes. If we cut out the Wall Street middlemen who are sucking value right now, and our property taxes are literally making them millionaires. Mr. DiNapoli pays 664 Wall Street bankers $1 billion of property tax funded fees every single year, and they don't even outperform the market. So one, we're going to get rid of the Wall Street middlemen. We're going to cut out the fat, and we're going to save $1 billion of property taxes every single year. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to address this housing crisis. Like I said, we're going to make a record investment into homes that New Yorkers can afford. And then the third thing is we can actually address these rising electricity prices that these utility monopolies are jacking up on us because the state is the one that approves these rate increases. And their auditor is nowhere to be found. We can actually lower their profit margin, their guaranteed rate of return, and lower electricity rates in the process. The state controller has the power to do that. And unfortunately, just like in the one and only upstate debate that we had a couple of weeks ago, where he skipped out on, Mr. DiNapoli, unfortunately, is nowhere to be found.
You beat me to my next question. Obviously, the controller's office can't directly audit the utility companies themselves, but they can audit the Public Service Commission. What would you do to audit them, and how could that impact prices?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate the question. So one, we would audit them, and we would apply pressure to the one thing standing between ratepayers and these utility monopolies that have become captured by National Grid and Rochester Gas and Electric, and you know them all, NYSEG, et cetera. And then very specifically, the state comptroller has the ability to lower the guaranteed rate of return, the profit margin that this regulator approves. They approve a 10%, nearly 10% guaranteed rate of return. We can lower that by saying that, hey, we're the third largest investor in the country, because that's the other part of the comptroller's job. And he can invest our capital at a lower rate than 9.5% and still earn a higher rate of return than Mr. DiNapoli's target rate of just 5.9%. So that could literally translate into, we've calculated $300 of savings into New Yorkers' pockets, literally not just freeze the rates, but lower electricity rates for New Yorkers. He has the power to do it. He refuses to use it.
There's a lot of concern over data centers and the impact data centers in Western New York could have on the residential ratepayers of the Western New York region. If you won the primary and were elected to Albany, what would you do to protect residents from kind of the spike in pay that we're seeing across the country when data centers enter an area?
Yeah, so, and the tragedy of this is, again, it's taxpayers' own money that is financing these data centers. So Mr. DiNapoli invests in the companies that are building the largest data centers outside of Buffalo and Rochester. So it's our own public pension fund, funded by our own property taxes, that he continues to light on fire, that is investing in these data centers that are leading to the skyrocketing of our electricity bills. So my position will be very simple. We will issue a moratorium. We will stop investing New Yorkers' own tax dollars into data centers that are increasing their electricity rates. Let the tech billionaires pay for those things. Let the tech billionaires bring the energy sources, not on the backs of New Yorkers. And when I'm state comptroller, that changes. And Mr. DiNapoli, unfortunately, refuses to do anything different. And he has been there 20 years. He does not need another 4.
Unclaimed funds, there's approximately $20 billion in unclaimed funds waiting to be collected. How would you get that money out the door if you were elected?
Automatically. Right now, Mr. DiNapoli forces New Yorkers through a gauntlet. You have to go to a website that you've never heard of. Once you're on the website doesn't tell you how much they actually owe you, just whether you do or whether you don't. Then you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get your own money back. This is New Yorkers' money. It's not the government's money. It is certainly not Mr. DiNapoli's money. So we are going to treat it like it's New Yorkers, and we're going to just send it back to you. We're going to get rid of this website that most people don't even know exists, and we're going to send you your checks automatically because we know your name, we know how much you're owed, and it's 2026. We have more than enough access to data and technology to just find you, and we should treat this money like it is yours, because it is. And we're in the middle of an affordability crisis, and we're going to take that seriously.
You mentioned it earlier, pension management has been a topic of conversation in this campaign by both you and, of course, the opponents and the incumbent. According to the data, you say that the comptroller has underperformed the stock market. What would you do differently to make sure that those receiving that New York State pension are benefiting to the maximum capability?
Sure. 2 points that I want to make on this. First is that the current state comptroller brags about having the one of the best funded pension funds in the nation. He talks a lot about that. What he doesn't talk about, what he leaves out, is that the pension fund by law must be fully funded. So it's not Mr. DiNapoli's stewardship or his credit. It's because taxpayers of the state of New York have made certain that it's fully funded. And we took a look, and because of Mr. DiNapoli's 39% underperformance, because he's given billions of dollars away to underperforming Wall Street managers, it's taxpayers who've had to make up that bill. We calculated $4.7 billion of higher property taxes from Erie County residents alone. So what would I do different? I would cut out the Wall Street middlemen that he has made millionaires off of the backs of taxpayers and public school teachers and firefighters. I would fire them, because if we didn't do our job for the last 20 years, we'd be fired. So that's what we're going to do with them, and we will replace them with practically free diversified index funds. This is investing 101, this is a more conservative way to invest. We will earn a higher rate of return for the pension fund at a lower cost to taxpayers, because that's the job.
Healthcare costs are also, through the roof and impacting New Yorkers. How can a comptroller either audits healthcare services or try to rein in some of those costs to bring them down for New Yorkers?
Yeah, so just this week, we saw that the Justice Department has executed a lawsuit against the state of New York, against the Department of Health. And this is a lawsuit on the largest contract that they have with one single vendor that they sold a multi-billion-dollar contract to fund the home care system in New York. And everyone knew this was a problem. Everyone knew this was a disaster. And the state comptroller, again, was nowhere to be found. And he said, well, hey, there's nothing I can do. I was cut out of the procurement process of this failed contract. But for the last 537 days since that contract has been executed, he could have audited that contract at any time. He could have dealt with the wasteful private equity owned company that is ripping New Yorkers off and is making New Yorkers who need the care the most suffer. 150,000 New Yorkers have been kicked out of this healthcare program by this private equity owned company. And Mr. DiNapoli refuses, still 537 days later, he refuses to audit them. So on day one, Nate, I can promise you we are going to root those guys out, and we will audit them first thing first.
Looking back at the pension management specifically, there are some investments that there, have been folks in the public who've raised concerns about, whether it be Palantir or other military related investments that, of course, have been used in play in some of the war torn areas of the world, Israel, Gaza, things like that. Would those types of investments continue if you were controller?
No. And this is another clear distinction. Right now, our taxes are financing Palantir, literally the IT backbone of Donald Trump's surveillance state, and his private militia, ICE, that is terrorizing our neighbors. Our tax dollars are funding government 6,000 miles away, war machines, using our taxes, our local property taxes, instead of investing in our upstate communities. Our tax dollars are going to a bunch of fossil fuel companies that have actually, and we calculated, they're not just killing the planet, they're killing the pension fund. They've lost the pension fund $15 billion over the last decade. So we will get out of those investments that are killing people, that are killing the planet, but are also importantly killing the pension fund and raising our property taxes as a result. We have no business financing that stuff, and we don't need to.
While a state controller doesn't have a vote with legislative bills, they can certainly propose, legislation that lawmakers can consider. If you were elected, what would be some of those priority legislative bills that you would want to see the legislature tackle?
Yeah, so one thing I would do, the state comptroller is also the chief financial officer of the state of New York. But you wouldn't know it by Mr. DiNapoli, because he never actually weighs in on the budget. He only does it after it's enacted. And I think New Yorkers deserve that independent voice at the table when those critical decisions are being made. And, one of the things you talked about, healthcare costs, Donald Trump gutting Medicaid budget, gutting food assistance, gutting funding for housing. Well, we have money. It's in the pockets of 139 billionaires who call New York their home. And the state comptroller has no opinion on whether those billionaires should pay just a little bit more of all of that wealth to help fund those things that Donald Trump is robbing from the state. Now, I do have an opinion. I think we can tax the wealthiest New Yorkers. And I think the chief financial officer to not have an opinion is malpractice. In any other entity, in any other business, or in any other, nonprofit, if a chief financial officer during budget season went on vacation and said, that's not my job, and was nowhere to be found, they'd be fired. And that's, I think, another clear distinction is we need to have New Yorkers deserve a very active and very urgent voice at that budget table, not to opine on the decision after all the decisions are made.
For those voters who just aren't familiar with you, who are you and why are you running for a sixth term?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's actually my fifth time before the voters. Remember, I was selected by the legislature when my predecessor had to resign. I would say it's an underappreciated office, but very fundamental to the functioning of state government. We are, in many ways, the back office operation in terms of, approving contracts, paying the state employees, making sure nonprofits get their grants, making sure local governments get their state aid. Managing the pension fund, very important to 1.3 million New Yorkers. They know for sure who the controller is and what the controller is doing with their retirement security. And then, of course, the audit function. I always say our office is, and more important than ever, right, at the times we're going through, accountability and transparency. And that's really what the audit function provides, whether that's on state agencies, public authorities, like the Thruway Authority, or local governments. And then, of course, our reports, our analysis, providing guidance to local officials on how to better manage their local finances. Obviously, we've been involved of late with some of the challenges the city of Buffalo is facing. Dunkirk has been an ongoing issue, as you know, that we've been very involved in. So while the controller, the title may not be obvious in terms of what we do, we are the office that follows the money, and we are very important to keeping the state moving forward. Not to mention the college savings program, returning unclaimed funds, the oil spill fund, all the miscellaneous very important activities that we're involved in.
It's a contested primary this year. 3 candidates. We haven't seen that in quite some time. For this office, why should voters keep you in Albany versus the 2 gentlemen running against you?
Well, they should read the Buffalo News editorial and endorse me. That's a good place to start if you need an independent, impartial evaluation. I would say that I have a track record. I've had a steady hand in managing the responsibilities of being the state's chief fiscal officer. I've doubled the value of the pension fund during my tenure, and at the same time, paid out over $200 billion in retirement benefits to public workers. You go down the long list of what we've done with our audits. Certainly try to make government more efficient, but in the worst case scenario, finding people stealing, we've gotten back about $110 million in restitution for New Yorkers of money that was stolen. And I think as we navigate challenging times, particularly with the volatile economy, with the restructuring of the relationship between Washington and the states in a way that's been hurtful to New York in terms of big budget cutbacks, especially on healthcare, nutrition, and so on, you want someone that has a proven record in managing this position to help us navigate through challenging times. And I would add that, unlike what we've seen with others in statewide office over the past few years that I've been in this position, no scandal. I haven't had to resign my office, as we've seen with governors and attorney general and obviously controllers, how I got here, not to mention lieutenant governor and some of the legislative leaders. I think having a clean record and managing an office with integrity has to count for something.
Affordability has been a big theme, not only in this race, but the 61st Senate race here in Western New York, and of course the 149th Assembly race. How can a controller's office or someone in the seat of controller bring costs down and make New York affordable?
Well, I mean, a couple of ways. And keep in mind, this is one of the challenges of our office in that we don't set policy or make law, right? So, and even with our audits, and I'll start with that, where audits make recommendations on how government could be more cost effective. We can audit and we can make recommendations. We can't enforce our recommendations, right? So we appreciate it when an agency or a school district or, a village embraces our audits because we think they could be more efficient and relieve the burden on taxpayers, but we can't compel them. We can't make them do that. But that audit function is a very important way to make government more efficient. Affordability, especially for our older New Yorkers, I'll get back to the pension fund that I mentioned earlier. Having a fully funded pension system, having the kind of very strong performance that we've had consistently, making sure the money is there for that defined benefit pension for our public employees helps to keep them in New York. 80% of our retirees stay in New York because that public pension makes the difference for them. If you're a family saving, and it's hard to save for a child's higher education costs, we have the 529 College Savings Program that we administer. It's one of the best managed college savings programs in the country, really has helped people to afford higher education. We also have the New York ABLE program, which is a savings program for people with disabilities. Again, helps them have greater financial independence without losing their federal benefits. So there are a number of ways with the work that we do that we contribute to that affordability question. And we're certainly going to continue to issue the kind of policy reports. We've done a lot, especially coming out of COVID, about housing issues, cost of insurance, cost of utilities. These are issues, again, we can't force the change. The legislature and the governor do that, and they've made some progress on those fronts in the budget that was just passed. But we certainly want to be a partner in having all levels of government understand New Yorkers have to navigate a tough landscape when it comes to household budgets and affordability.
Utility costs are part of that affordability equation. Obviously, your office cannot audit the individual utility companies, but you can audit the PSC, the Public Service Commission.
Sure.
Has that something you have done? And if so, what are the
Yes.
results? Or is that something
Yes.
that you will
Yes.
ramp up?
Yeah, and Nate, I'm glad you asked that because, my opponents, they like to make up a lot of stuff, and that's one of the challenges, people aren't paying close attention. They sometimes believe what they hear when it's not true. They've been saying that I have not audited the controller's not audited the PSC. It's not true. We consistently audit the PSC on a host of it. We have an audit underway right now on their implementation of their affordability programs. We were the office that first called out with our audit that the PSC was not doing the planning that was required of them to meet the state's climate goals. And of course, as you know, as part of the budget this year, they basically had to put off dealing with that issue. We've done audits to look at how PSC orders have been enforced, whether there's been the appropriate follow-up. So we have audited PSC. We will do more. But you raise an important point because I think both of my opponents, certainly at least one, has been saying they're going to go in and they're going to audit the utilities to save money. We have no authority to audit utilities. Utilities are private companies. That's what the PSC is there for. It is their responsibility to do those audits. And of course, part of what the legislature and the governor worked on this year was to change some of the guidelines around the PSC monitoring of the utilities to not have some of the costs that have been passed on to consumers, to not have that continue to happen, to have issues of affordability for consumers be part of the executive compensation package. Those are all thoughtful reforms. We're going to do our part. The legislature and the governor are trying to do their part. But this notion that we haven't ordered the PSC, just not true.
There's a lot of concerns over data centers here in Western New York, across the state. The stamp plant in Genesee County, Tonawanda, several municipalities have issued their own moratorium on data centers. But as they start to kind of infiltrate New York State, possibly, unless the governor signs the statewide moratorium for a year, what can your office do to make sure that the residential ratepayers aren't footing the bill, so to speak, and paying exorbitant fees because these data centers are coming in and jacking up all the rates?
I mean, I think there are two issues. One of them certainly is utility cost of energy. The other one is water usage, both of which can impact on a community in terms of supply and cost. So one of the things that we've done is to reach out to the companies where we're a shareholder that are involved with data centers and to say we would like to see a policy of community first, that if in fact they go through the local process and they get an approval, that in fact they are accounting for energy usage, they're accounting for water usage, and they are not passing those costs on to the local community. And that in fact, if they have a data center proposal, they are speaking to the local community and making sure there is acceptance. I think this is going to be one of those issues that's going to be with us for a bit. Data centers are not going away, right? I mean, everybody's using, right? This becomes our office, and between computers and artificial intelligence, I mean, this is part of the new world that's upon us. How we do a better job of regulating that, monitoring it. I think that's why you saw the legislature propose the idea of a moratorium to try to have us reset, where we're at, see what the ground rules are for New York State. We'll see whether or not the governor signs that. But either way, I think we have to impress upon the companies that are building these data centers that they have to be sensitive to local community concerns and cost impact on communities. And community first means if you're going to be making money off a data center, you're the one that has to bear the burden of those increased energy costs, those increased water costs. Don't pass it on to the local residents.
Unclaimed funds is another topic of this primary as well. I think the figure is what, 19 or $20 billion in unclaimed funds for the state. Your opponents have kind of attacked you, saying, you haven't done a good enough job getting that money back to New Yorkers. What is the status of unclaimed funds, and what can you do to get that money back to New Yorkers?
Well, again, this is another one of those areas where, distortion, if you repeat a lie enough, people may believe it, but people are uh, not drawn into a lie. Um, Unclaimed funds is something we've had a very ambitious program on. We're always going to community events. When I first started as controller, you had to have a paper record to get an unclaimed fund. We have now almost all the searches done online. We've modernized the computer system. We actually have an expedited program now that we started about 2 years ago, working with the legislature. We started by sending, instead of have people come to us, sent out checks of $250 or less. Now we've raised that threshold to $5,000 or less. We're returning about $2 million a day. One of the misunderstandings, again, fake news from some of my opponents, we're sitting on $20 billion that we're not. Unclaimed funds has been around for a long time. It's part of the abandoned property law. Every state has it. We have enough money in reserve to return the funds that are asked for. Now, these, for those who may not be familiar with, these are old bank accounts, gift cards that expired, health insurance checks that never got cashed, things like that. After a period of time, they have to be turned over to the state, and we keep the account in safekeeping. We don't keep all the money. At the end of the year, the legislature and the governor use the money that has not been claimed as part of general purposes for government. This notion that we have $20 billion that we're sitting, we're not. And if suddenly you were going to send $20 billion out, first of all, you'd put a big hole in the budget, number one. Number two, these accounts go back to the 1940s. Some of the information is incomplete. We'll never figure out who really is the rightful owner. And many of the people have passed away. The businesses are long out of business. The money will never be claimed. So this notion that we're sitting on money and holding it or hoarding it, or it's some secret, a budgetary gimmick, it's not true. We are returning more money than any other state, and we're very proud of that. And we intend to expand our efforts. Especially, you get to the affordability question, no reason for us to be holding on to these accounts. We want to put this money back in the pockets of New Yorkers.
And to the point you just made, I think, according to your website, over $330 million just this year alone has been returned to New Yorkers, right?
And the numbers going up. And the other piece of what sometimes people don't realize, we have a very aggressive auditing role with financial institutions, insurance companies, to make sure they're not holding on to the money. We've stepped up our oversight so that the money is turned over to us. So one of the reasons why the unclaimed funds amount goes up, part of it is that the law has changed and the dormancy periods have gotten shorter for many of these kinds of accounts. But the other part is that we've been more aggressive in saying, you can't hold on to that money. You got to turn it over to us so we can find the rightful owner.
Pension management has been another conversation in this. Are you proud of the way you've been able to manage this pension?
Shortly after I became controller, we had something called the global financial crisis.
It's a minor news story. It didn't get much coverage.
Minor news story.
No movies were made about it. Yeah.
I was running shortly after that happened, and I remember my opponent at that time basically blamed me for the global financial crisis. I said, well, it's a little more power than a controller normally has. And then we had COVID a couple of years ago. We've had to navigate through some very challenging times. And I don't know if proud is the right word, but I feel I've lived up to my obligation to provide that retirement security for our public workers. We do have a requirement that our pensions be paid, but other states have that as well. But if you don't have the money there, you're not going to pay people. And because we are well funded, over 95% funded, that is a strength for the finances of the state. We had this past year a 11.94% positive return. Our long-term goal is 5.9%. We have a much more conservative goal than other pension plans because I don't want to take so much risk. But we meet and exceed our goal, not just on a one-year basis, but you look at a 3, 5, 10-year basis. We meet that goal. Independent evaluation. I say to folks, don't just believe me, and certainly don't believe my opponents when they're critical. Look at what the Department of Financial Services has said when they audit us. Look at our independent fiduciary review that's done every 3 years. They have said our results, we are very good at meeting our benchmarks. We manage the plan with the best interest of the members in mind. The fees that we pay are not in any way unreasonable or excessive. We are a well-managed pension fund, so our members can know that their retirement security is there. And I got news for you. We're not We don't manage the fund as a political football. We don't manage the fund based on a pet project that, may be important to me. And you look at some of the things my opponents are saying, I wouldn't trust them with this pension fund. I wouldn't trust them with New Yorkers' retirement security. They keep talking about divesting from this, whatever that anybody's mad at in a given year. Yeah, sure, you may want to divest, but you can't use this as a political football. We have to look out for the best interest of the members, keep those plans funded. Just had a big debate this year about fixing Tier 6. Your public employees who are listening know what that's about. We could only have that discussion because the plan is well funded, so we can meet those obligations. We've stood the test of time through good times and bad times. We have a well-managed, well-funded pension plan.
One of your opponents specifically called out this particular question I have, and I want you to have the ability to respond to it. They called out your recent trip that was fully funded, apparently, to Israel. Why did you go to Israel? Why does the state controller need to go to Israel? Does that serve any function to the roles and responsibilities you have?
Well, some people I know have forgotten, but something terrible happened in Israel on October 7th. There was a massacre of Jews and Israelis. The Hamas attack was horrendous. New York has had a historic relationship with Israel. Many families have a very close connection there. And the Jewish Community Relations Council, which is a well-known organization in our state, organized a solidarity mission of not just myself, but other elected officials to show our concern for what happened to the Israelis as a consequence of October 7th. It was a trip that they invited me on. Again, other elected officials as well. And under the rules of the state, I went to the State Ethics Commission and I said, would this be permissible for me to go on this trip? And we got approval to go on the trip. So they're trying to create some notion there's something untoward about it. There wasn't anything untoward about it or anything wrong about it. And I think I think that showing compassion for one of our closest allies that suffered a horrendous attack. Think of all the folks that came to New York and this country after the 9/11 attacks, having the support and solidarity when a nation is under assault. I don't think there's anything inappropriate about that.
To the point you made earlier, you can audit an agency or a municipality or a school district, whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have much teeth behind, either enforcement or just forcing someone to do that. Is that something from a legislative standpoint you would like to see the legislature maybe give consideration, allowing a little more teeth to your audits and recommendations?
I mean, it may sound nice. I don't think it would ever happen. I think you have to be realistic. I don't think they would ever, turn the controller into the policeman of New York State. But that's where it really gets back to the credibility of the office. We have a very professional staff of auditors. They're civil service people. They're not political appointees. I recall there was a previous governor that didn't like one of our audits on economic development. I think it involved some of the money spent in Western New York, as I recall. And he didn't like the audit, and he said to the reporters, that's the controller's opinion. He told his auditors before they even did the audit how to write it. Just the opposite is true. If you ever met one of our auditors, you can't tell them what to do. They're very professional. They have their own standards. They're protected by civil service. It's the credibility of our work and the fact that I have maintained the office as much as you can in this political environment, as above the politics, above the day-to-day political battles. We are the least partisan of all the offices. I think that's what people expect from the controller. So the strength really is the credibility of our work and not politicizing everything that we do. If you go in with a preconceived notion or agenda, then the audit work, in fact, will be criticized as not being independent, not being thoughtful. So, they do respond to our recommendations. It doesn't mean they have to agree with them or implement them. But what we do then, I should point this out, particularly if it's a high impact audit, and we're concerned that there's not embracing of our recommendations, we'll go back in 6 months, a year later, maybe even more than that, and we'll do a follow-up audit. And what is key to us, especially on the local government side, is having the press follow up on what we are putting out there. We need a vigilant press. That's how the public gets informed. So there's an audit that's critical of spending in a school district. The press reports on it. What's more important than anything else is the citizens going to the school board meeting and waiving the audit saying, how are you responding to what the controller recommended? That's why, this democracy of ours needs to have, the circle complete. What we do, what the press is reporting on, what at a grassroots level people do with our work, we need to encourage more of that.
I think that governor you were describing was also upset with a broadband audit that a certain Buffalo reporter was poking around about and encouraged to happen. So, these things happen.
Did that reporter have a beard by chance?
He did. Yeah, he wore a cap and weird is weird. My thanks to the three candidates for taking the time to talk to me ahead of primary day. Once again, primary day is June 23rd. It's a Tuesday. So if you're watching this after June 23rd, well, you're too late. We have more details about voting posted right now on WGRZ.com. Thanks again for watching. I'm Nate Benson, and we'll see you at the next one.